Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by the movie Hangout. The Batman 2 is happening. That's the topic of this video. Before I jump into this fantastic article from Cosmic Book News, go on over, click subscribe, comment, like. I'd love to hear your opinion on the article. Okay, so the Batman, the highly anticipated Robert Pattinson Batman film came out. A lot of people liked it, some people didn't. Doesn't matter though. It made enough cash, enough dough, that Batman 2 is going to happen. Now, the main question is who is going to be the villain in this sequel? In the first one, you had the Riddler and the Penguin, and you also had Catwoman. Some people were speculating in Batman 2 that you're going to be having the introduction of Robin. Names like Jeremy Renner are floating around to be playing the sidekick, which I think is kind of an odd choice because in the comic books, Robin is actually younger than Bruce Wayne. Renner is obviously older than Robert Pattinson, even though I think he's a better actor and would make for a fantastic Robin. It just doesn't seem to fit. But let's go on over here at the Cosmic Book News. The Batman 2 announced at CinemaCon. At the Warner Brothers presentation, a sequel is confirmed with Matt Reeves, the director, Robert Pattinson, and the rest of the team returning. The Warner Brothers presentation at CinemaCon is currently happening, where the Batman 2 has been officially announced. The presentation kicked off with Warner Brothers celebrating the success of the Batman and Toby Emmerich coming to the podium. Matt Reeves then came to the stage, thanked everyone, and said Robert Pattinson and the entire team are returning for Batman 2. Thank you all for your tremendous support for the Batman. We couldn't have gotten here without the faith and enthusiasm of all your teams around the world. I'm excited to jump back into this world for the next chapter, said Reeves. Here's Batman 2 tweets. Just in the sequel to Matt Reeves, the Batman is official and just announced. Here you have Matt Reeves on stage actually giving the announcement. Very, very cool. A lot of people's reactions to this. But more importantly, I'm excited for this because, number one, Bruce Wayne and the Batman is probably my top two favorite superheroes. I've always had a fascination with Superman, but I'm glad that they're continuing the saga. They're continuing this slightly different take on the character. I think there's a lot of different aspects of this world that was created to explore. A couple of villains that I would love to see in the sequel or maybe in the third movie. And the one thing about villains that I love is that I think in many ways they have more layers than a protagonist in a story. One of the villains I would love to see, which I think is a fantastic character but has not been done correctly in a movie, is the character of Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze, in my opinion, is a dynamic, multi-layered, fascinating character, kind of a tragic character. And the only series that really captured that, the beauty in that character, was Batman the Animated Series. Many of us who are Batman fans, especially if you grew up in the 90s when you were a kid, go back to that series because it was just so beautifully done and still holds up today. In fact, I think it's even better today than it was back then because as an adult, I really see how great the writing was, the voice acting, the animation, the storytelling, in comparison to the crap that's made today. The Mr. Freeze character in that series, I mean, he starts off being really terrifying and scary, but then he's sad and tragic at the end. I mean, he really goes through an amazing arc and a great character development. I would love to see him in this world as long as they give him the right amount of attention and development. The other one that has never been done live action, but was again in the Batman the Animated Series, is the character of Clayface. I just have always found that character to be fascinating. not only because he could transform into other people and look like whoever he wants, but again, he was a tragic character, a person like Mr. Freeze who had it all. But then an accident happens, and what he had, his life, is taken away from him. And there's nothing he can do to ever get back to that old life. So all he does is basically uh, take out vengeance on those that did him wrong. And I just think he's a fantastic character. But I would love to see them incorporate those two characters. Uh, but one thing I do not want for the sequel is the same mistake that big budget Hollywood movies always make. In the first movie, they usually have one bad guy. And then the second movie, they'll have two or three bad guys. And the third movie, they'll have three or four bad guys. I mean, they just keep like adding more and more bad guys. And I hate that because what ends up happening is from the Hollywood perspective, they're like, oh, we're raising the stakes. We got to add more bad guys. I disagree with that completely. You stick to one bad guy, or you have one main bad guy and then another villain who's kind of like on the periphery that is not going to be a huge role in the movie. But basically you focus on one antagonist and you really develop the character. You really dive deep into that character's life. So there's a lot of gravity to the final conflict between the antagonist and the protagonist. But we'll see what they end up doing with this. Um, Anyways, let me know what you think. Do you think the Batman with Robert Pattinson was good enough to warrant a sequel? Are you going to go see the sequel? Or do you think, you know what, this is just another lame attempt by Hollywood to try to make a quick buck? Comment below, let me know. And as always, if you want to get future rants, reviews, or original content, click subscribe. Later.